This program is brought to you by Tiger Butts Beer. That's right, folks, Tiger Butts. It's the satisfying suds that gives you tiger blood. Available now at your local grocery or apothecary.
Howdy folks, today I've got something brand new and in my opinion pretty darn exciting to share with you. And that is, well, what comes inside this box anyway. So I just now got this in the mail today, just a few hours ago. Been waiting on this thing and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. Before we get too far into the video, obviously I got to get this thing out. And just in case you're curious, this came from 52 Toys AliExpress store, and they're back to plastic square corners. They kind of quit doing that for a while, which is maybe neither here nor there, but maybe for this particular package they felt like it needed a little extra protection. I don't know. And boy, they packed this thing super securely. Holy cow. Oh, would you look at that? Man. So they packed it upside down, no biggie. Hey, it came with a really cool collector's pin. Past 2 or 3 that I've gotten for the VIP membership have been glow-in-the-dark, or at least had some glow-in-the-dark featured. Doesn't look like it does, and that's okay. It is still a very cool looking pin regardless. Oh my God, look at the size of this box. I'm going to tell you right now, folks, I barely have enough room to maneuver in this studio. Alright, so, like I said, a very big package.
That's what she said!
Not getting the whole thing in camera here. Yeah, I'm going to tell you, this thing is probably got to be 1.5 feet tall, something like that. Alright, so not quite 1.5 feet tall, but 16 inches, 1 1/3. It's still a pretty damn big box. And one more time, I just need to zoom out on this because you need to see the size of this thing. But it is very cool looking packaging one way or the other, no matter how you take it. First thing I'm going to say about this particular figure, it is a VIP version, so just bear in mind whatever you're looking at here in this review is going to be specific to the VIP membership. If you were to buy a general release of these, it's going to be a little bit different looking. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get this guy open. So yeah, a couple other things I want to point out about this particular figure is, one, I'm looking at it on the box here. Well, let's say 3 things. It's just about all in Chinese. There's very little English on the back here, which is totally fine. It's in the spirit of 70s, early 80s Robo gattai transforming figures, you know, like Voltron and some of the predecessors of Voltron. But got 5 Toys on the side there. Beautiful artwork on the front. Got some little action men here on the front of the package, though I will point out that these are represented as bonus items, and I believe that's going to be inside the box. They are not in full color like they're shown here on the outside. That's a little bit of a Power Rangers thing. Or a little bit of a Voltron thing, because Voltron came before Power Rangers. Another thing I'll point out here, since we're making our way around the box, is that this particular figure does not have a character designation number. Typical other Beastbox releases will be BB-whatever number, and the most recent release, I think, is it BB-71? I think Gale is the highest numerically, as far as recent releases go. And this is an all-new novel transformation. So it's kind of based off of 2 things here. One, it's based off of sort of the card stacking, you know, whatever you want to call that. A lot of their more recent bonus items, they'll stack 4 up and form you can form 4 to form a cube inside of a 5cm box charger. And this is what I'm referring to in case you're not familiar with Beastboxes. These are all bonus items that came with separate figures. So this is the guitar/axe that came with Neo Geo. These are the Gatling guns for Anatopti. Dragonfly, triple changer. These are the missile pods that came with Commando, Komodo Dragon. And this is the wings/buzzsaw, whatever you want to call that came with Gale. So, funky exotic weapon system. So basically, as far as transforming style, that's essentially what this is. It's 4 creatures stacked one on top of the other and kind of a card system. The other part of that too is that these are 4 mythical creatures in Chinese lore. So you have, I can't remember the name of it, but it's essentially a phoenix. You have the Chinese dragon, there's a name for that, I can't remember that. You have Xuan Wu, and you have Baihu. 3 of the 4 of these have already been released as regular-sized beast boxes, although in very different forms, obviously. The Phoenix has yet to be released. I can tell you straight away, people who are into beast boxes are definitely waiting on that one. Last I heard is maybe next year sometime, something like that. Essentially, yeah, you have these 4 characters that transform and merge into form this thing, and that is where the word gattai comes from. Wasn't familiar with that word before. But that's essentially, I guess, a Japanese word for fuse or merge or something like that. So basically, yeah, they're 4 distinct characters that merge to form this giant robot. Now that I'm looking at it more closely, I am seeing this is the bonus item. That's partly why this package is so huge, is this is a pack-in sleeve. And it is a nice looking piece of artwork. I'm definitely keeping this. So yeah, we'll take a quick look at that in just a second here, but I want to get more into the box here. Now, it's very easy to look at this and say they way overdid it with the packaging on this. But I'll tell you this much. What this reminds me of is those kind of import toys that we used to get here in the U.S. As a kid, you'd find them, you know, most retail outlets and sometimes even places like gas stations or, you know, freaking grocery stores. They might have a toy aisle or something like that. You'd find this kind of thing in here. This old school style Japanese robo type thing. And very often, yeah, they very much had elaborately overdone packaging, way too much packaging on them. And, you know, those of you who are traditional old school G1 Transformers type guys, you probably remember back in the day, and that was true for a lot of toys in the 80s, that a lot of them were packed pretty securely with pretty heavy styrofoam, and it was really kind of a fight to get it outside of the box when you needed to open it out of the package and whatever. So it's kind of what this reminds me of. Pretty cool package design. It is very much a throwback, and I love it. Man. Well, it gives you a lot to look at. We'll say that much. Closer look at that. Yeah, you got kind of a monochrome Sacred Power Robo backer insert. And this thing is huge. It's the biggest backer insert I've seen by a long shot. Definitely a keeper. I want to keep this thing pretty nice and clean and wrinkle-free if I can. Love these grid pattern on here. Very subtle graphic detail. It's very cool. I'm going to see if these two will hold it in place. All right, as long as I don't move it, I think that'll work. So, real quick, inside the package, we got some Beastbox cards here. Got instructions, and there again, they're giving you nothing. There's no character designation here. It's just Sacred Power Robo. And we got some additional catalog material stuff, so very cool. All right, well, this is interesting. I don't know exactly what this piece is. I can't read Mandarin still, unfortunately, but I believe this is an advertisement for their online comic / multimedia. I believe they were going to turn it into a novel or something like that, but it's basically a Beastbox story. Kind of a multimedia push that 52 Toys had been doing to basically create their own official lore for Beastboxes. Pretty nice artwork. So back to the big old styrofoam insert here. I gotta say again, this is ridiculously huge. Man, it's a lot, that's all. So we'll touch on that in just a second here. We'll talk about what came with it, and that is this thing. Let's see what we got. And a rip. Oh, dude, that is very cool. And check this out. Got all these little figures here. Sort of a little squash chibi style type character design. Obviously one for each one of the creatures. Whatever the total is here, I'm sure they're all representative, as is the mythical creatures of some form of earth, wind, fire, and water. And yeah, there it is right there. Sacred Power Squad. It's an interesting choice to put it in this elongated cardboard box. Don't know why they did it that way. That's just how they did it. Man, they even packaged them with bubble wrap. They really felt the need to secure and protect these pieces, I guess, so power to them. Now, these are billed as erasers, and as I understand, this is actually also a throwback to 80s style Transformers toys. There were certain Transformers that came out in the 80s that would come with like a little bonus figure, And it was sort of like a little one color, you know, kind of a gummy eraser. And as I recall, I believe they were all typically red, if I remember right. So all right, so we got this little dude. The styling on these is really cool. Yeah, I'm digging this quite a bit. And they do have a rubbery texture, definitely feel like erasers. That little dude. That little dude. Very cool. He even has like a little set of animal eyes carved into his helmet there. And this little dude. This has got to be the turtle guy. Well, that's great. He even has like a little wushu ponytail. Nice. They stand up very well. Very cool. But the question is, do they actually erase? And the answer is, they do indeed erase. So this is X-Mattingly ruining his collectible for your product knowledge. So there is a little bit of material that came off there. It is definitely eraser type material. See just a little bit of wear on the heel there. These little dudes, they're going to hang out in the back here. So it goes without saying, like with almost any other collectible, nobody needs this stuff. But honestly, it's super endearing for the old school charm and, you know, a little bit of throwback to the kind of stuff that I grew up with in the 80s. So, having said that, let's move on to these figures. Got a box charger, of course. Well, they put that character card right in the center of this package. Interesting. There we go. It's got the dragon. Got the turtle thingamajig. Now, we do not have a Western equivalent of this particular mythical creature. And we have a phoenix. And again, I am not remembering the Chinese name equivalent. But here in the Western world, we of course call this a phoenix. And last but not least, we have a Baihu. So first thing I want to point out straight off the bat is this is of course a VIP version, like I mentioned before. The main thing to note about the difference between this particular one and the regular release one is that this one does have some extra paint apps and that kind of thing. And without a photo reference in front of me, I can't pinpoint exactly where those are at. I do know that the spray painted detail on the tails, that's something that's unique to this particular version of this figure. It might be the crest on the back here, some additional paint details along the wings and that kind of thing. But there again, yes, if you get the standard release, and this one is transparent on the standard release too, it just doesn't have this paint on the tail. All the rest of these figures are going to be opaque plastic, so this one would be kind of a steel blue. Now that's something else to be said, as obviously these are fairly basic little figure designs. Not a whole lot going on here, but even within that, there are some subtle mobility details that do really kind of flesh out these characters. So you do have some ball socket joints and that kind of thing. Yeah, that one's got an opening and closing mouth. This little teeny tiny mouth, it actually has a jaw. That is pretty cool. From what I do know of the standard release, I think I actually would have preferred that one, to be honest with you. I mean, sometimes transparency is kind of cool, but it can be too much. And in my opinion, I think this is just a little bit too much. It does have some nice subtle spray painted details on some of these though, like here, maybe a little bit hard to pick up on camera. You do have a little bit of a spray effect with this black on transparent white. So pretty cool details. So there again, you got a little bit of mobility in the paws there. Nothing in the mouth, and that is by design, of course. This one has some nice mobility in the wings, so they can kind of flap up and down a little bit. At any rate, let's keep this review going. We're going to jump right into a transformation demo. But before we get going, I do want to point out that 52 Toys has started doing like a star rating system for their transformations. 1 being the lowest and 5 being the most difficult. And as far as that goes for most recent figure reviews, Gale was a 3 and it was not a difficult transformation at all. Neo-Ju is a 5, and a lot of people complain about that one, so that is maximum transformation difficulty. But at any rate, this one is right in the middle. I guess they're doing half-star ratings, and it's 2.5 stars, so it should be a pretty easy one. We'll take a look at this. First off, I should say we're going to start off with the box mode transformation, so these are all going to be folded up into their card forms and combined to form a cube. Then we're going to move on to the Robo Gattai Gestalt version. So getting it kicked off here, we're going to start with the dragon. This forms the base of the cube. And if you look at the overall shape, I mean, it's all geometry. It's pretty basic. Basically, you're just going to need to get things tucked in where they need to go so they can fold up and form its card shape. So the way you do that is you basically just fold the legs up and then flip them around and then tuck them inside that cavity there. Got to fold that up, flip it around, tuck it inside. We're going to do the same on the opposite side. Fold it up, flip it around, tuck it in. Fold it up, flip it around, tuck it in. Then you got that going on there. Now we need to remove the tail piece, and that's something else that should be said about this particular figure, is every one of these figures has a removable part that is not part of the transformation, and there's unfortunately no storage for any of these parts either. They're intended for use actually on the robot form. So basically you have those pieces that are from creature to robot form, but nothing for the cube form. So that being said, there is a tail piece that needs to remove from the dragon, and that actually forms the hilt of the sword. So we'll hang on to that piece. We'll get back to it later. Then it's just a matter of folding up the head and the tail piece. So those ear tufts will fold back. Close up the mouth if you've got it open. Tuck the head in underneath. Same on the tail. Just fold that up. Then it's basically pretty simple. So you're going to fold the end pieces down into the middle section. So you're just going to fold that up and around. Geometry is identical on both sides. And then they're going to fold down like so. Now you're just going to want to make sure that the hip pieces are pointed up, so these horizontal gold stripes are going to be fitting horizontally like that. There's nothing to connect these pieces together. It's all held together by friction, but that is not an issue because it becomes a solid shape once you form the box mode. So set that one aside for a second. And we'll move on to Baihu here. Now there again, removable part happens to be this tiger's butt. All right, that's just a design choice, I guess. So we'll get back to what this thing is used for later. So because it forms two arms of the robot mode, it actually splits in half, and that's the first thing that needs to happen here. You just need to break it apart. Then you're going to tuck the paw in and bring it down about like that. So we'll just have it about that shape. The exact positioning will become more obvious as we keep transforming it here. So something else to note here is there's sort of like a stopper piece right here, this peg, and that's going to stop this piece from moving too far up. So as you're rotating it, basically you're going to rotate it up against the body, and you may need to pull the leg back a little bit because there's this tab piece here that needs to connect to the inside of the paw. We'll get back to that. So you're going to rotate it up until it pushes up against this tab piece. Once it's up against that, then you're in the correct position. And then we'll just need to make sure this leg is straight down with the paw tilted down also. We're going to rotate this half, and it's on this joint right here, on this screw. Rotate that down like so, until it's basically pretty much at a 90-degree angle across the top there. And I misspoke. This tab is actually going to go inside of this joint here. It's not going to connect to the paw. So you're just going to rotate that piece up about like so, about that shape right there. And actually, I kind of had it backwards. There is a groove inside of this paw, and that'll connect to that tab. So you'll just want to make sure you have it up against that tab. So you basically got this shape going in here. Now, what I will say about these instructions, what's really nice, I think they did a good job on this set, is they actually showed that transformation for both sides. Because it is kind of a particular organic shape and it's not completely geometric, it does help to have that visual so that you could see it going both ways. And that hasn't always been the case on other figures. So they did a pretty good job with setting up these instructions to make it completely obvious. That being said, so we got to turn around, do the other side here. So you're going to rotate this piece up and get the paw up about like that. And you're going to scrunch it down about like so, and you're going to rotate it up, and there again we have that stopper piece that's going to keep it from rotating too far. and that shows you exactly where it needs to go. I'm going to straighten the leg out and the paw, about like that. Rotate from that hinge, get it to about that 90-degree shape, something like that. And then you're basically just connecting all the other pieces together. You're going to want to make sure that that tab goes inside the groove of that joint there. That'll come up, and you'll have this piece that connects to that tab, or the paw rather. Now, you've got these two opposing shapes, so they need to combine together to form their own card. So basically we're going to do this. Flip that piece that way. This piece goes this way. They're basically on opposite sides. You have a post and tab connection, and they're basically opposites of each other. Pretty much combining those together. Now, one thing I've found with this particular figure, this is probably the hardest one to transform just because it's a bunch of intricate organic shapes they have to combine together, is these pieces may not be 100% lined up, so you may have to snap it together. And that requires a little bit of pressure. Yeah, but once you get it locked in, I mean, you'll know it's together. It's pretty obvious. So, pretty solid piece there. So we'll do that. Moving on to number 3. I'll take care of this turtle dude. So there again, removable part. This needs to come off for the transformation. So we'll set that aside. Now the head needs to come up, straight up like so. And then you're basically going to fold it forward with the head completely extended like so, and then it's going to fold straight down. And actually, what you're looking for is for this slot to fit inside that groove. You just want to make sure that you have it folded up in a way that it's going to connect to that, and you'll feel that snap there. So got that. Tail piece is going to need to fold, so you may want to raise the back end up like so. Bring the tail all the way down like that. Then this piece is going to fold up, and it's going to come up and around, fit inside that groove. So you got about that shape going on there. And you're just going to want to make sure the whole thing is flattened out, the front and the back side here. And then we're going to pull these pieces sideways. They're actually going to go this way. So you just want to pull them out like so. And on the legs, you've got a peg and post connection. So you've got the slot right here and the peg right here. That's just going to come together like so. Got about that shape right there. And you've got that going on. Pretty simple. So we've got that piece, and we'll move on to the fourth and final. I just want to say real quick, I did fiddle around with this for a little bit, and I found that you can kind of tuck in the wings for a resting bird pose. As you saw here, I had it sitting on top of this cube. I mean, it barely registers as a bird on a perch, but it can work, but you got to do some fiddling with it to get that to happen. So I'm going to pull these wings straight out just to make sure they're in position. And of course, we're going to remove the tail feather pieces. Pop those out. And these are kind of delicate plastic pieces, so I would recommend just kind of a twisting motion and do it relatively gently. You definitely don't want to stress the plastic on that joint. So just, yeah, twist it, slide it out, it comes right out. The first step, we're going to get the tootsies inside of those little grooves there. So we're just going to turn them around, get them flush up against the body. Very simple. Got about that shape going on there. We're going to push in the tail piece. That'll come in like that, right up against the butt. Now, if you have the head tilted down somewhat, you're just going to want to make sure you have that rotated up, and it'll snap into position. And these whiskers, if you want to call them that, are going to fold up against the side of the head there. Basically, the way they fit in this space, you just want to make sure the small ones are on top. You'll have these bottom pieces essentially flush up against the bottom side of the head there. Now we're going to rotate this joint so that it's in its forward position. So you're going to rotate that forward like so, both sides. And you're going to want to make sure the decorative part, basically the top side of the wing, are still facing top side. So we'll just have that like so. Make sure they're rotated up. There again, you've got a tab and groove connection here. So you're just going to fold that piece right up against the side of the body there, like so. Same on the other side. Get that going on there. And then you're going to fold it up. So these pieces are going to fold up and over like so. And they basically just snap into place. So yeah, there again, it's another tab and groove connection there. Just fold it up. And you got number 4. So now it's just a matter of combining all these together. So the base piece is the dragon, like I said before. So it's completely geometric all around. And I don't think it really matters which side you use to stack with the other figure. But be that as it may, you've got your Baihu piece here, and there again, it's a groove and tab type slot, so that'll stack right on top of that piece. Just combine it like that. And there is a peg and pose connection on this side too, so just snap them together. So far, pretty solid. Now we'll get the turtle on there. Now the hint with this one is that you've got a space for the Baihu head here, or half of Baihu's head. That's where this is going to fit in. You're going to want the bottom side facing up. Something to be said about this is it's really interesting geometry for how these pieces connect. It's so cleverly done that basically you just have to push them together. You don't have to think too hard about where the peg and posts are, because assuming you have them transformed correctly into their card shape, the geometry is going to line up perfectly. But basically, yeah, you've got these two posts on the bottom side of the turtle, and it's just going to line up with a post here, and there's another one somewhere over here. I think it's this one. You have this turtle head that's going to have to go at a 45-degree angle inside of the groove. It's going to fit right on top of this head. That's really all you need to worry about. So you're basically just going to push them together and scrunch them up. And that's it. And really the same goes for the final piece. Again, it's another 45-degree angle piece, and it's going to sit directly on top of the turtle's head. So it's going to be head to head like that. And there again, you have these peg and post connections, and they're going to line up perfectly with the bottom side of the Phoenix. Just push them together, and that's that. So this is one figure that, even though it's a combiner, it transforms pretty perfectly into a stacked cube form, and it's basically no fuss at all. This is an easy transformation. So we'll go ahead and get that.
No problem.
Pretty simple. Now we're just going to reverse our tracks, get all these back into creature mode, so we can get this thing into its robot gattai combiner mode. All right, let's get these guys separated out. Very simple. We're just going to pull them apart here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I want to get them all back into their relative animal form just to use that as a starting point. Just to be clear, I'm not going to reattach these weapons parts because that's not going to be necessary for the next stage in the transformation. Neither am I going to bother bringing their legs or appendages out where it's not necessary. And for Baihu, because it forms two separate arms, I'm going to leave these split in half. Alright, let's clear these guys away and get started with the torso. So first thing, we're going to do exactly the same thing we did with the box mode. We're going to raise the neck all the way up, bring the head up like that, and that'll rotate down. And there again, you're going to want this groove to match that particular tab piece, so we're going to wind up tucking that in about like so. Tuck the head in about like that. The snake tail is going to tuck in the same way. Basically, you're going to lift the butt, then you're going to fold this gold back piece down into that groove. You're just going to collapse it up like so, bring the head around, and it'll tuck away neatly inside of that space. Now, we're going to fold this piece all the way up and over, and there are some tabs here that it'll connect to. Just do that. The legs will need to fold over and back around, and there are these tab and post connections that are going to connect together, so it'll lock in securely like that, and you'll form about that shape and do it the same on both sides. Just going to fold that up, about like that. And you can see where that's going. We'll save that for later. So we're going to flip this piece over and around like so. That'll come up like that. Then it'll push in. We're going to save that for later. Enter the Phoenix. Now we're going to turn the legs around and fold them up inside the creature just like we did before. We're going to fold up that tail piece like so. Then we're going to bring these shoulder wing pieces up and over like we did before, except we only want to go about 90 degrees. So we're going to get them about here for now, and we'll get back to that, of course. But then we're also going to rotate this piece up about like that, with this black rotating part left at about 90 degrees. So we're going to leave it alone about like that for now, and we'll get back to this piece. So again, the dragon's going to be relatively simple. we're basically just folding everything around this centerpiece right here. So these black and gold hip pieces are going to go like that. The legs are going to rotate around 90 degrees in opposite directions on each side, and the feet are going to come up like so. So that actually worked out as part of the transformation, but just in case it doesn't come down, this heel spur needs to be in this position, so you'll just need to make sure you do that. And on the opposite side, the antlers of the dragon are going to fold around and become the heel spur on that side. Basically got about that going on. And I'm here to tell you, Unus is pretty darn fascinated by all of this. As far as the arms, you're basically just folding this figure up to turn it into a pair of arms. Going to collapse in the paw on the forelimb, and that'll collapse in about like so. So you want it in about that shape. And then, so there again, you want to get it right up against the stopper peg, so we're going to collapse it this way. And it'll fit against the contour of the body pretty nicely. So you got about that position right there. So here's the interesting thing, something to keep in mind, is my instinct for this particular piece is that because it's the right half of the character, it should be the right arm. But that's actually not how they want you to do it. So just be aware that basically when you have it correct, this is actually going to be the left arm. So you're basically switching sides. Right half of the creature's body, it's going to be the left arm. And if you're looking at the instructions, that's how they show it. So I guess my best advice really would be to bend the elbow like that. But you're going to want these little, I guess, fin pieces or whatever you want to call them pointing down ultimately. And then the tiger's head is going to rotate. And that's another interesting thing about this character is it's a solid chunk of plastic in its animal form, but it does have two joints separately for each half of the head so that it can rotate like a wrist in its combiner form. When you have the head pointed up and the eye on the outside of the body, that's the correct position. So, and obviously you want this interior piece on the interior side. Last part of that is you're going to rotate this big old 5mm peg out. That becomes a shoulder, obviously, and that's about where you want it. Set that aside. We're going to do the other one real quick. There again, you're folding up the arm, just compact it up, and you're going to get it up against that peg. So you're going to rotate it back until it hits right up against that post there. And that's where you know to stop, of course. So there again, you want both of these pieces to be pointed in the same direction. So you're going to rotate this piece up like so, and you can bring the claw in like that. So you got about that shape going on there. There again, you can bend it at the elbow if you want. Bring out that post for the shoulder, turn it in like so. And again, eye pointing outward. This is going to be the right arm. And then you're left with these pieces. So this one right here, we'll get back to that. So that's basically the hilt of the sword. Combine those pieces like that. Then you can attach these flame feather pieces one at a time here. They just push in like so. And you get them about lined up like that. So you got that going on there. We'll set that aside. One thing I failed to mention here is the front part of the turtle does actually need to come up. You're just going to fold that up like so. And then these pieces will meet in the middle. What that does is it exposes this post so it'll connect to the dragon. So that's the basic setup for Sacred Power Robo. Let's give him his sword. Let's give him his... So that's something else just to be aware of. This is how he has to hold his sword. You have to take the hilt off from the main body of the sword and slide it underneath the claw. I have never seen another action figure require this. But then there's one more anomaly, and that is, what do you do with this thing? You see, the tiger butt becomes the back of its head. Yep, that is literally the transformation for this figure. So Sacred Power Robo sort of has this bird feather, sort of a shaman-looking headpiece. Not at all like Animal Voltron, which is pretty cool. But then it also has this sort of rat tail that's made from the tiger's ass. That is an unusual design choice. Anyways, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about articulation on this figure. So you can see at this point, it's probably a given to you that its mobility is inherently going to be limited. It has this huge chest piece that's kind of blocking its mobility with its arms to begin with. I guess you could raise some chest pieces and kind of be able to bring out its arm a little bit, but ultimately, I mean, that's kind of what you're working with. But the cool thing is, for the most part, it's combined with these big, heavy-duty 5mm ports, and they do hold in place fairly well. And the way they're set up is you do have some additional mobility, like the shoulders can rotate. Wrist can turn, of course. You've got some elbow movement, of course. You can get them up like that. The legs have quite a bit of mobility in them. You got rotation at the hip, knee. You can actually pivot 2 different ways, and that's thankfully due to its transformation. These super skinny legs, of course. Can turn at the waist, of course. There's a reasonable range of motion. The biggest issue to me, to be honest, is aside from the arms and this huge chest kind of blocking its ability to turn up and down, is its head. There's no head movement whatsoever. That's inherently the issue with its transformation. There's just no way of getting around that. It'd be mechanically impossible to be able to add that posability with this figure. Yeah, all in all, I would say its mobility is good enough to play around with. And really, there's 2 different ways you could look at this. One is it's kind of a plussed up version of the old school 80s Robo Gattai, which had almost no mobility at all. But then looking at it in terms of a modern action figure too, where you're probably going to want to be able to play around with it more like you do with your other toys. If you're a kid, of course, or an adult who plays with toys. I don't know, either way. Not judging. Yeah, and part of the problem here is these pieces keep butting up against each other, and the arrangement there is not the best. So I don't know if there's a better way around that. Biggest problem limiting its mobility is this elbow joint. If this part of the cat's leg could bend backwards, if you could get it back and away from that, then you'd have a much huger range of motion for the arm to be able to swing backwards and that kind of thing. It's just not there, unfortunately. But regardless, you know, it's something that can definitely be played with. One way or the other, I would say it definitely works as a display piece. Having said that, we'll take a look at some details here. So one thing I gotta say is this figure has tons of subtle, really nice detail that you really have to get in there and take a look at to appreciate. The scales on the dragon are really nice texture here and very light reflective, so you get a nice texture going on there. True to the VPI version, of course. I'm not a huge fan of lots and lots of transparent plastic, but I will say that the way they spray painted on this sort of silver gray effect on top of the transparent layer does look really nice, and it really catches light very well. So another thing I'll say about this figure in regard to combiners or transforming figures in general is very oftentimes, if you watch Transformers reviews, there are usually a lot of complaints where they often comment on the quote-unquote backpack. I'll tell you what, this figure, it has, again, some questionable design choices here, but the backside does clean up very well. And again, I can't recall if this gold crest is going to be on the standard release or not, but that's a nice touch to have that on the backside there. Overall, it's very nicely detailed, and again, lots of beautiful texturing in here, very subtle texturing, and it's just really nicely sculpted. I would definitely say, as far as 5.2 toys goes, this figure was absolutely a labor of love. Even with its shortcomings as a posable action figure, it is just very nicely done. It's a beautiful showpiece. And you know what? I'm going to take this another step here because I kind of feel like the arms should be more mobile if you flip them around. So basically what I've got going on here is this sort of wing feather piece is going to be up inside the shoulder right there. I just flipped it around basically. Flip the wrists around. That is an option I would say is doable, is you could flip the arms around so that the fins are up and the paws of the legs are kind of towards the backside. The biggest issue right here is, again, this part of this limb does not have a joint in it, and that really kind of hampers its mobility. So you could get more out of this, I think, if you flip them around. And that, again, is not what the instructions show you, but that certainly is an option. But it is a beautiful figure. I'm really digging this thing. And I think Unus wants to make a new friend.
Welcome to the family.
Now it's time to give this mystical gattai Rainbow Warrior a box grade. This is my rating system of 6 categories with up to 5 points each for a total score of anything between 0 to 30 points. Sacred Power Robo is an awesome throwback to traditional Robo gattai toys from way back in the 70s and 80s, and it really is a great theme on Chinese legendary beasts as a combiner team. As a character study, 5-2 Toys knocked this one out of the park for a score of 5 out of 5. Sacred Power Robo has separate creatures with subtle detail, really good styling and play value, but they can also be combined to store as a cube. But then they also combine to form a humanoid robot with a decent amount of articulation, complete with weapon. For something that's a relatively small 5cm machine cube toy, I think this has a lot going for it. My biggest beef with this figure is its dinky, oversized dagger. It's too small to call a quote-unquote sword. Those little Sacred Power eraser dudes are a nice throwback to 80s toys, but to be honest, I would have greatly preferred the bonus item to be some sort of an extension to give the figure an actual longsword. 4 out of 5. Transformation is pretty straightforward. It's fun to do, it shouldn't present too much of a challenge even for a kid, and everything connects together pretty solidly in both robot and cube form. 4 out of 5. Its articulation is somewhat of a mixed bag. On the one hand, you could view it as a plussed-up version of an old-school Robo-Gattai. On the other, the massive chest and shoulders get in the way of the arms, and not having head movement is a bit of a letdown. One way or the other, you're going to find it pretty challenging to get into some decent action figure poses. Also, certain design requirements for the creatures like the tiny feet on the Phoenix, or the fact that Baihu is a little more than a solid chunk of plastic with legs limit them to little more than display pieces. 2 out of 5. Sacred Power Robo is pretty nicely built. Like I mentioned before, parts connect together pretty solidly and it feels like sturdy plastic. My only concern is if the joints in the skinny dragon legs become loose eventually. If they do, the robot mode will be pretty useless. Also, it's a lot of transparent plastic, of course for the VIP version, so there's another concern that this figure might become brittle over time. 4 out of 5. So in conclusion, this figure is an awesome tribute to retro giant robo combiners, and while it does have some shortcomings and odd design choices, it's really well crafted, and it's a fun figure to play around with. 5 out of 5. And that brings the box trade total to 24 out of 30. So there's a look at Sacred Power Robo, 5-2 Toys' first foray into an all-new machine cube dynamic. Retro-style Gestalt combiner teams. There's another one on the way that'll combine into vehicles, which I'm really looking forward to. So in a way between the two, they've kind of got a lion and a vehicle Voltron thing going on. One thing's for sure, even though 5-2 Toys has been at this for about a decade, even within the framework of stuff that turns into cubes, they still keep coming up with really cool, interesting stuff. And their engineering and designs just keep getting better. I'm almost certain they couldn't have put a figure like this one on the market even 5 years ago. So I'm always left looking forward to seeing what they can do next. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you could take a moment to help out my channel, leave a like, share it with a friend if you know someone who'd be interested in a modern take on Robo Gattai, or leave a comment. I like hearing from you. At any rate, I hope you have an awesome week, and I'll catch you in the next one.